we're covering right now the case with Donald Trump, who has left Trump Tower and is on his way right now to the Manhattan courthouse, where he is going to be arrested and arraigned. Of course, people are calling it unprecedented. Of course, that is for the United States president, but not for many other politicians. So we will be seeing, we have Brian Buckmeyer at the scene there, how this actually is going to all turn out. As you may know, Trump's lawyers filed motions that he not have his mugshot taken, that there not be a camera inside of the courtroom. The judges ruled there will not be cameras inside of the courtroom, trying probably to avoid the aspect of some sort of circus that's there. Now, an arraignment is typically a very pro forma or straightforward thing. It doesn't take a lot of time. The charges are read, the defendant can waive the waiver of the indictment, and most defendants are likely to enter a plea of not guilty. Certainly, we believe Mr. Trump will as well. Other speculation has occurred with respect to whether or not Mr. Trump will say anything in the courtroom by way of a statement. My experience tells me the judge will not allow that. It's not relevant to the proceedings. And I think that what I find very interesting as a trial lawyer is that, you know, I've seen a lot of high-profile clients who have a lot to say outside of a courtroom. We can think about Alex Jones and many of the cases that we've covered here at the Law&Crime Network. But when they get into that courtroom, it is a very traditional, antiseptic way of doing things, and now the judge is in control, not the people like Alex Jones or Donald Trump. So it could be a very daunting thing for somebody who's used to having a platform when they can say whatever they want, whenever they want. This judge known to keep a very tight control of the courtroom, so it'll be very interesting. I'll say one final note. I've been listening for a couple of weeks of people wildly speculating legal theories and whether or not the case can be proven beyond a reasonable doubt or not even having seen the indictment. I find that personally to be reprehensible in terms of lawyering is concerned. It is not only misinformation, it poisons the public's one way or the other viewpoint of a case. We have to wait to see what this indictment says. Now, we do expect this indictment is going to be what they call a speaking indictment. In other words, it just won't be charges with some vanilla language as to what those charges mean, but rather the prosecutors will lay out the factual predicates, the factual information that led them to charge this case. By way of a quick description, just so that our audience knows what really happened procedurally in this case. As you know, the United States Attorney's Office was investigating this matter under the Trump administration Department of Justice, where Michael Cohen, his lawyer, and at the time they called him Fixer, was actually charged for giving payments to Stormy Daniel in a hush money scheme, and they basically said that was a violation of the law. But what happened with regard to the case with Mr. Trump? Well, Attorney General Barr, of course, stepped in and said, well, one, we know there's a policy that you can't indict a sitting president, but then you're going to close this case, actually telling them to close the cases rather than keep it open with the possibility that afterwards they can indict former President Trump when he left office. Even more interesting to me, and I can tell you this having led a prosecutorial agency, what I found to be unbelievable about this case was apparently Cy Vance, who was the district attorney in Manhattan at the time, had an open investigation. And as often happens when law enforcement agencies who cooperate with one another on a basis of trust, the federal government came in and said, listen, we got this investigation too, so we're asking you to stand down for the benefit of not having cross investigations going on, which Cy Vance agreed to do. It wasn't until approximately a year and a half later that Cy Vance came to the knowledge, based on what we're hearing and reporting, and actually statements he made over the weekend, that he was kind of shocked when a year and a half later, Michael Cohen was indicted by Trump's Department of Justice for the hush money payments, wherein Trump was referred to as individual one, and yet the investigation federally with regard to Mr. Trump had stopped. And that is when Cy Vance reconvened or recommenced the investigation that he was told to stop in order for them to do a full investigation federally. This is really something that I think as a prosecutor, if this happened to me, I would have been completely thrown off and shocked about. So that investigation and the grand jury began to meet. Now, people wonder what happened to all this time. Well, Cy Vance lost a year and a half waiting for the Department of Justice to do their thing, which they never had any intention of really doing, so the good faith there was shot. Then he has to wait 2 years in order to get tax returns from the Supreme Court of the United States. Now, I make a note of this, 3 years more have gone by because of these problems, i.e. Vance thinking that this case was being investigated, secondly, waiting for the tax returns, which makes me wonder, and again, I'm speculating completely, and we will know in about 1/2 to 40 minutes, 1/2 hour to 40 minutes from now, whether or not there is a tax fraud component to this case, because they're clearly saying that's why they were waiting for those tax returns. Why would they be doing it? So I know we're talking about whether it could be campaign violations, whether it could be tax violations, whether it could be Donald or McDougal, whatever her name is, allegations associated with it, whether it's Stormy Daniel. Bottom line is we just don't know right now. But I have to note that when Alvin Bragg came into the office, according to Cy Vance, that grand jury had reconvened, and he basically picked up that investigation at that point in time. So we got a lot to discuss there for sure. But I think that we really need to step back and we need to take our time and let the judicial system do what it does. Listen, unfair prosecutors, unfair judges, whatever you want, both sides are going to have something to say about it, but that's not the way our judicial system works. Charges have been filed, right or wrong. They're going to be litigated in a courtroom and not in a court of public opinion. You can be assured the judge is going to make sure of that. There will be a determination on what happens with those charges. Should there be a conviction, there's a right to appeal to make all of the arguments about unfairness or fairness or whatever issues you think are worthy of appeal. This is the way our criminal justice system works for every day in every jurisdiction in every place in the United States of America, and this case should be no different. So let's make sure that we keep our minds about the fact that we need to make sure our courts operate under the rule of law, not in a court of public opinion, but rather based on the facts and law that are presented inside of the courtroom. Because, you know, once we make a mistake here, it breaks down the chain everywhere else. And it wouldn't be fair to all those who have to go through this process. So please, I'd ask everybody to at least do things based on the facts and the law of the case. Lastly, with regard to commentary that is being made by individuals out there about the politics of this, I have to say, and I've been saying it for years, and I'll say it again, and I know my friend Gene Rossi, who's a guest on the show, has heard me say this. We've actually debated this issue back and forth. It's a fair debate to have. I became prosecutor through a position of being appointed by the governor. My term was 5 years long, which overlapped the governor's term of 4 years. The reason that was done was to take politics out of the decision-making process. And so while you come through a political system in order to be appointed the county prosecutor in the state that I was in, once I became the prosecutor, I didn't have to worry about a constituency. I didn't have to worry about votes. I didn't have to worry about PACs and super PACs and money. I think money infused in the prosecutorial and judicial process, where judges have to go through an election system, is a recipe for disaster. And if for nothing else, this proves the point. So anyway, these are just some of my observations. It's going to be a tremendous day today to see whether or not the judicial system holds up the way it always does, or whether or not it won't. We're going to see shortly. And on that note, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back.